I'm Becky Dowd, and this is The Journey to Salvation. Join me as we walk alongside real people and hear the unique journeys that led them to faith in Jesus. Today, my guest is Claire Nix. Hello, Claire.
Good afternoon.
How are you doing?
I'm doing great.
Thank you for coming in today.
Well, it's my pleasure. Anytime I can talk about my Lord, I'm ready.
Well, good. So I was just thinking about my first memory of you. I think I might have more than one, but the very first one was I was friends with your next door neighbor, the Kernodles, Janet Kernodle, and you lived right beside them. And I think you were probably a teenager or
Yes.
young adult, a teenager at that time. And were you a majorette too?
Yes, I was.
See, I remember that too, going to the ball games and just watching you twirl. And that was just so exciting. You know, whenever you're that young and you see someone older, a teenager, you're like, I want to be like them, you know.
Well, we tried hard and practiced a lot, so we thought we were all right.
No, y'all did a great job. But since then, I've gotten to know you at church. We used to go to church together for years and years and got to work closely with you there. And but why don't you just give us a little background information of your life growing up, maybe until you were 18 or so?
Well, my life, Becky, is very common to my generation. I'm obviously in the prime of life, I will say. Mm-hmm. Excuse me. And my dad served in World War II. And my mom was a homemaker. Actually, my family, I was kind of thinking about it today in preparation for this. I had kind of forgotten it, but my family, my dad's maternal and paternal descendants were cross-county folks, and my mom's mother was cross-county folks.
Oh, wow.
Mark's descendants were cross-county folks. As a matter of fact, my grandchildren can count like 5, 6, and 7 generations of people living in the Wynn area,
wow.
cross-county area. So I am definitely a homebody. I went to college for a little while and, even finished at A-State and lived at home. Yeah. But like I said, it was a very simple, loving, happy. I had a very, very almost June Cleaver, except we didn't live in as nice a house, and my mother didn't wear quite as nice a dresses as June Cleaver. Yeah. And my dad actually was saved as an adult. So, and my mother already was, so church was a huge part of our lives. And everything was just going on track. I was getting into junior high, and I was so ready for all of the stuff that goes with, junior high and high school. My sister was a couple of grades ahead of me. But something happened when I was in the 7th grade, just before I turned 13. My dad suddenly died of a massive heart attack.
Oh, wow.
Quickly. He was in the hospital because he was kind of quote unquote not feeling well. And I think maybe your dad even saw him in the hospital some of the few days that he was in there. And he suddenly died. And my mother found herself at 38 being a widow. And I had been to one funeral in my life before that time, and it was some distant relative of my grandfather's, and I had never been close to a casket. I had never I'd never experienced anything. My grandparents were still living, except for my dad's dad, and he was a lot older. He had died much young, many years before. To say that my life changed is an understatement. Mm-hmm. And I will say, my precious mother, she just could not handle it. And she went to bed. Mm. And I did not know what life was going to be like. Mm-hmm. And what I will say, though, and I saw it years later which is another part of my story. But I saw our church family and even the Wynn community be exactly what God calls the church to be. There were so many people in our little house that you could hardly move, and they ministered and helped, and it just really seared into my brain the memories of the people coming in and out. And interestingly enough, one of the ladies that came into my mother's kitchen was my future mother-in-law.
Oh, wow.
And I remember her coming in with something, some food, to leave with us. But I will tell you, I saw something then later that also changed my life. Because my mother was grieving so horribly, and I mean weeping, just horribly. I'd never seen anything like it. But sometime after that, I don't really remember how long it was, but our church had a pastor come in, and he was doing an emphasis on the family. And this was the Baptist church downtown, the old Baptist church. And so he had an altar call. So he was calling all of these moms and dads, husbands and wives, to come forward with their children and commit publicly to rear their children in the nurture and admonition of the Lord. And there sat my mother alone. But she got up out of the choir. She sang in the choir. She came down front, and she motioned for my sister and me to join her down front. And again, weeping almost uncontrollably, she committed to raise my sister and me in the Lord. Oh, wow. And I saw that broken woman. There was a strength that became so evident in her, and she kind of became like the woman of steel. I mean, she just, the things that she did for us and endured and did alone. Now, of course, I had two uncles especially that were wonderful. Mother was an only child, but my dad had a large family. And so there was extended family that was very, very helpful. But those day in and day out things she did, and she did beautifully. And if I have perseverance in my life today, I give God the credit for giving it to my mother, and I saw it lived out in our home.
That was just a shock because of his age, him passing away.
Yes.
But for you being that age and your sister being a few years older, I just can't imagine going through that. My words aren't adequately describing. I mean, I was literally fearful. I had no idea what my life was fixing to be. It was just, it was just unbelievably sad. But on the other hand, it is one of the many examples in my life where I saw God's grace and His comfort and His provision lived out and change a life. Right.
And so, life did go on. And something else that happened very significantly in my life before I turned 18 was, to the chagrin of my mother for a while, I fell in love at a very young age with my love of my life and my high school sweetheart, my husband, Mark. We were engaged by the time we graduated from high school.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And my mother, because my dad's upbringing was so simple, he was of that generation. He thought that a college education was the answer to a good life. If you had a college degree, then the life, it was whatever you wanted to make it. And they had lived very simply, preparing for my sister and I to go to college. And then after his death, Mother was on a mission. She was determined my sister and I were going to college. She never asked us if we're going to college. Do you want to go to college? Her question always was, where are you going to college? So it was not an option.
Yeah.
So Mark and I married, though. I'm fixing to pass 18. Is that okay? We married when we were 20, so we were young, but he was just as committed to me finishing my degree because he understood, mother's mission in life. And once I did, then the Lord brought a precious, precious stepfather into my life, Hugh Bones Taylor. He was from Wynn, and he was our claim to fame. He used to play professional football and all. And so he became the substitute maternal grandfather for my kids, and he was wonderful. So that kind of took me into our married life. And
Okay, let's back up a minute.
Okay.
Because tell me about when you surrendered your life to the Lord.
oh, mercy me, of course.
Because I heard Mark's story on his.
Yes.
And it's kind of funny, but I want to hear
Yes.
what you have to say first.
I'd written some stuff down. I can't believe that's the most important part. Yes, I was in the third grade.
Okay.
And I began to have that, I didn't even know how to describe it, with that uneasy kind of that inside feeling that was just strange and unsettling. And I hate to use the word fearful, but I was kind of fearful. So I finally realized that that was God telling me that I needed Jesus. I'd heard it, all my life. And so as a little third grade girl, 8-9 years old, I went forward in church during the revival, and I told the pastor that I was lost and I needed Jesus to save me.
Oh.
I didn't know. I certainly didn't understand all of what that meant, but there was such an overwhelming peace that immediately settled into my little heart. And I was, convinced that it was real, but as time, as you get older and you see a lot of people begin to question that childhood salvation, there was a point in my later life that I thought, am I really? And, and I did what I learned to do when there's something about spiritual things or God that I did not know the answer for. I went to his word. And I am a strong, strong believer that God speaks to us through his word. That's the primary, through his word and the Holy Spirit. That's the primary way that he corresponds with us. And so he led me to Romans chapter 10, verse 9. If thou shalt confess with thy mouth the Lord Jesus and shalt believe in thine heart that God hath raised him from the dead, thou shalt be saved. And God showed me that is exactly what I had done as a child. So I never wondered again. I was secure in him from being a young girl.
So whenever I was doing Twyla Miller's episode, she was saved during the Jesus Revolution. And I called and spoke with Rick Proctor, who is your brother-in-law.
Yes, married to Mark's sister.
Yes.
Was married to
Yes.
Mark's sister, yes.
And anyway, but he told me he remembered when Mark was saved, your husband.
Yes.
He told me whose house it was at. And so whenever I saw Mark not long after that, I talked to him about that a little bit. And he said, he was telling me that he went to, I shouldn't tell his story, but I don't think he'll mind.
I don't think he will.
But he was trying to impress you, I think. I don't know what age he was at this time.
We were about 16.
Okay. And so he had gone somewhere.
His mother's family, yes, his grandmother's.
And he came back and he was going to go to church, and he was going to show you that he was a good man, so he was going to go up when they had that altar call. But he said he was sitting there, and he said he could not move his feet because he knew he was going up for the wrong reason.
Yes.
But then he was saved during one of those meetings that they had during that time at, I think he told me, the Baker's house.
It was either the Bakers or it was Dr. and Miss Jackson's house.
Yes. So anyway, so I just thought that was a neat story.
Yeah, because there were a bunch of us that were going to go forward because we had felt like we had really recommitment that we wanted to make public, and I had told him all about it when he came back from his grandmother's, and I knew that he was just a little skeptical, but he was like, okay. So yeah, yes. And when he got saved, he really got saved. Yes.
Yeah, that was a sweet story, I thought.
Yes. And so we were blessed in that our marriage began tried to have a understanding of what God meant for marriage and our roles as husband and wife. And he was the love of my life, I'm telling you. And I knew it when I was 16. Although he told me at 15 he loved me, believe it or not.
Oh, really?
And I don't know that my mother thought we would last, and that's not the norm, and I don't necessarily recommend it. But for us, it was God's will, and He's very much honored our lives, and we've been very, very blessed.
So you went to school, got married.
Yes, I finished my degree, but by the time a music degree, by the time I finished a semester early, I was pregnant with our first daughter, and so I didn't want to. My mom had always stayed home, and so I wanted to stay home. So Mark was good with that. So she was born, and then in 2.5 years later, we had our precious second daughter, Chrissy, and life was great. But I will tell you, this is a little odd, maybe. But for some reason, I guess maybe because my dad had died so young and I never had any brothers, I had an interesting kind of longing to have a little boy because I had never, other than the Kernodle kids, Kernodle boys, I had never had, a real association with little boys. And even most of my cousins were girls. And so anyway, I started praying for a little boy. I had my precious girls. They were blonde-haired, blue-eyed little girls, and I wanted a blonde-haired, blue-eyed little boy to go with them. And this is really bizarre. You might even cut this part out, but no joke. I'm watching TV one day, and I've forgotten what the commercial was for, but there was this little blonde-haired boy rolling on a hill in green grass, playing with these white, fluffy puppies. Cutest little boy, you've ever seen. And I literally out loud said, God, I want a little boy just like that.
Oh, wow.
That's what I want. And honest to goodness, that is what I got. Our son Todd was born in 1981, and he ended up with blonde hair, had blue eyes. And I'm here to promise you, this is the truth. We ended up with a white dog, and that dog had white, fluffy puppies, two of them. And I walked out of my house one day. He was playing in the yard. We live on a hillside. He was rolling in the green grass, playing with those white, fluffy puppies. And I stood there going, well, Lord, you gave me exactly what I asked for. Yeah. I had my little boy playing with white, fluffy puppies in the yard. Our lives were great. We were getting into that life. Nikki was, by this time, was in ninth grade, and Chrissy was in junior high. Todd was in third grade. And something that I need to stick in here, I had forgotten to mention, one of the things that happened before Mark and I got married, Mark had a brother that was a few years older, and he died in an accident on the farm in 1973. And my father had died young. Steve died very young. And so we had experienced grief, both of us, in real ways. But, life had gone on, and, we were happy, and our children were happy, and we were loving, our church family. Our girls had been saved, and, at young age, and we were active in all the different, church activities, and everything was just wonderful. But something happened in the spring of 1990. We were having a revival. Back in those days, they had revivals. And for some reason, Becky, I could not explain it. And when I told Mark, I said, this is just so bizarre. But I said, I am having this most extreme urgency to pray for our little Todd's salvation. Mm-hmm. He was barely 8. And, the girls had been saved young, but, boys usually were, come a little bit behind on, maturity. And, but I was weeping. I would sit in my bedroom, on my bedroom floor, begging God to save that child. Oh, and wow. I just couldn't figure out why. And we even had a prayer meeting, ladies. The pastor had a prayer meeting for the ladies for the revival. And I even shared with the group of ladies that were there to, please pray for my son. I said, he's young, but I just have this urgency. Mm-hmm. Well, he was saved during that revival. Precious, precious. We came home one night from it, and Mark led him to the Lord. He prayed there, with us in his bedroom, and then he went forward the next night, and he told, the pastor that he had trusted Jesus, and so we were rejoicing. Our family was complete. We would all spend eternity in heaven, and everything was just wonderful. Well, come the fall of that very year, the absolute nightmare of every parent. And it happened to happen on our farm again. Todd was playing over on the farm. He did that. He had this little 3-wheeler and his little white helmet. He would, we lived off the farm, but his parents lived on the farm. He would ride that thing back and forth, and he was spending the day over there. Had spent the night at Mark's parents, because Chrissy's birthday party was, that weekend. And anyway, he was going back and forth, and he'd get on the combine ride with Mark. He'd go to the coffee shop and get ice cream with his, papa. He'd go over to his grandma's house and, and just back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. And just a kind of a typical fall day. And my mother-in-law came home from the grocery store, and she realized she hadn't seen him for a while. Anyway, without going into any more detail, at the time, that was the farm CB radio era. And Mark hollers over the radio that Todd's missing. And I told Chrissy and her little friend, I said, call my mother, Mimi, get her to come and pick you up, and just tell her something's wrong. I don't know what it is, but come and get it, y'all. Well, before I even got to the farm, Mark screamed over the radio to call an ambulance. So I stopped on my way. No cell phones then. And the Lord did something to me on that drive to the farm. Sometime before that, our pastor and a good friend, Don Donovan, had preached through Revelation. And when he came to Revelation 4:11, thou art worthy, O Lord, to receive glory and honor and power, for thou hast created all things, and for thy pleasure they are and were created. I thought that was the most fabulous verse in the Bible, and I memorized it. Just intentionally memorized it. I loved that verse. I'm driving over to the farm, and the tone of Mark's voice, something was badly wrong. And I began to quote that verse. For thy pleasure they are and were created. And I said, Lord, I know Todd was created for your pleasure. He's yours. We've given him to you. I don't know what I'm fixing to find, but I just know he's yours, and please, please, please. And I quoted that verse over and over and over. I get to the farm, the shop, Mark's, the grain truck is at the shop, and people already gathering and lights on everywhere. And I climb up on that grain truck, and my father-in-law and Mark were in the back of that grain truck with our son, trying to revive him. I fell to the ground, and pretty soon, the ambulance got there and we headed to the hospital. And I told Mark, I just said, God has just given me this verse. And I just kept quoting that Revelation 4:11 over and over. And I said, Mark, God has created Todd for his pleasure. I don't know what he's going to do, but, he is, he's his more than he's ours. Mm-hmm. And that wonderful ER doctor, don't even remember, I have no idea what his name was, came out and asked some questions, and and the ER was filling up, the word was getting out, and our church family was gathering around us, and my little son had a short life. God did take him home. And as soon as I got home, we had to go pick up our girls. They were at my mother's. And we get home, and my house is full already of people. And when I got up to our bedroom, the Lord brought back to my mind the spring when I was so burdened to pray for his salvation. Mm-hmm. I went, oh, dear God, that's why. Mm-hmm. That is why. Because there was no doubt that he had reached the age of understanding, and we knew where he was. And,
and at that time, God knew what was going to happen.
Yes, he did.
He already knew.
Yes, he was preparing. I think that was one of the ways he was preparing us for what was to come.
Yeah.
The only way, most everyone, I'm sure, that's listening, they've experienced grief of some sort. Somebody that they love has gone to be with the Lord. But I will tell you, Becky, that grief, I would try to think of words in the English language to describe it. Mm. And literally, it was like a shroud fell over our home. The grief was so intense, it was hard to breathe. It was literally the weight was such a heaviness. And that night, Mark and I are sitting on our bed, and I'm going, how do you plan a funeral for an 8-year-old? It just, the whole, it's felt like a nightmare.
Yeah.
And of course, anyway, and people were staying in the night at our house. We had friends and family that's sleeping on our floor. And that morning, early the next morning, finally, we fell asleep. I woke up. Mark was still asleep, and I was trying not to wake him up, and I just was laying there thinking, oh, mercy, this really is real. My phone rang. It was Odell McCallum. He didn't say, Claire, I'm going to pray for you. He said, Claire, get your Bible. He said, one of the passages was, he said, turn to Joshua chapter 1. Be strong and courageous. He said, read it. He didn't read it to me. Mm-hmm. And see, all along, all through that night, I knew what I needed. I needed God to speak to us, and I needed his word. Mm-hmm. But I will just frankly tell you, I didn't have it in me to open it. But when he called, he instructed me. He instructed me. I read 2 passages.
You can't say no to Mr. McCallum.
No, you couldn't. Absolutely not. And so that began the healing, the way God really healed our hearts. Becky, it was through his word. Mm-hmm. Of course, as time went on, things were difficult, but there's just so much I could share. I guess I just tried to do the highlights. But one of the things God impressed on me so strongly, I mentioned Nikki. By this time, Nikki was in the 9th grade. And he gently spoke directly to my heart that if I closed myself off for 2 or 3 or 4 years, I would lose her high school years, and I could never reclaim them. And I was just as much her mother as I was Todd's mother. And he gave me the ability to try with his grace to be the mother that they still deserved, because they deserved their mother. So that's one of the big, big things that God did. Of course, Mark, having tried to revive our son, was, and something else I found out, I'm no psychologist or therapist or counselor or anything, but in my little sphere, I have found out that grief is grief, but there's different layers of grief. Like when there's an extended illness, that's grieving in a way that a sudden accident like our son, that's not there. It's that's sudden, all of a sudden.
Not prepared for that in any way.
It's a different type of grief. And Mark doing what he had done was a different type of grief, a different layer of grief. And he was suffering so badly. Yeah. And I started begging God for peace for him. I said, God, he's just broken. Mm-hmm. God did something that like I said, he began to do for the rest of my life. He led me to Isaiah 26, 3-4. Thou wilt keep him in perfect peace, whose mind is stayed on thee, because he trusteth in thee. Trust ye in the Lord forever, for in the Lord God Jehovah is everlasting strength. Becky, I wept and I wept when I found that verse, and I knew that was God's answer for us. I memorized that verse. I said it over and over and over and over. I said it to Mark over and over and over. And I learned later that phrase, perfect peace, the word perfect in the Hebrew is the same word as peace. So it's like he'll keep you in peace, like a double portion of peace. And that has become our life verse. That is the one that when we're given the opportunity to share with someone who's grieving, that's the verse that we always share. And so, the days were, as life does, going on. But if I could just take a few minutes to tell a couple more things. About in February, after Todd had died in November, I was sitting at my dining room table by myself because Mark did, life went on, and so he was out, and the girls were in school. And it just was not a good day for me. It was just not a good day. And I had the privilege of starting to teach high school girls in Sunday school. I absolutely loved it. It just opened up God's word to me, a new journey of studying his word and just learning. And I just had God was giving me a passion for it. So, actually, and it's a group of girls that is now our pastor's wife, and another of our staff pastor's wife was in that Sunday school class, Stacy Dunvant and Heather Mayno, and we were studying the book of James. Chapter 1, verse 2, count it all joy when you fall into various trials. Well, I just preached to those girls to the hilt. I mean, I was saying, girls, do you realize this doesn't say, please count it all joy, or you should count it all joy? I said, this is like a command. Mm-hmm. And I listed all these horrific circumstances that could befall, life. Mm-hmm. And I said, God says right here, we're supposed to count it all joy. That day I was sitting at my dining room table. God vividly brought my words to my mind of what I had said to those girls. And I went, oh, me. And that sweet, quiet voice, are you going to do what you told those girls they should do? Because it said all, A-L-L. So I sat there trying to even think of how to word. I didn't even know what I needed to say to the Lord. But I finally said, okay, God. As best I can, in faith, I'm going to try to count this all joy, but you're going to have to help me do this because right now I do not feel joy in my heart at all, and you know that. But he was so gracious. He accepted my sincere effort to try my best to obey him, and that was kind of a turning point in my personal. The grief continued, but
maybe in your healing.
It really began. There was a couple of other verses. We got so many sympathy cards that our sweet postman lady, she had to bring them to the house. We lived out. And so she had to drive down our drive and, hand us this bundle. And of course, we read them all. And in one particular one, how and you open up the card, and at the bottom of the left hand side is this little bitty Bible verse, in these little bitty font, and it said something about tears in a bottle in the book of Psalms. And I went, tears in the, well, I don't even know what that meant. What is that? So it gave the reference. So I think it's 56:3. So I looked it up, and it's a verse about put thou my tears in thy bottle, and and I thought, what? I'm not even sure what that means. And I had a footnote in my Bible that in the ancient East, in those days, people would collect their tears in little vials or little bottles, and they would lay them at the tomb, the person, the grave side. Oh, wow. And let me read it exactly, because I did reference it in case I couldn't remember it, and I'm not remembering it. Put thou my tears into thy bottle, are they not in thy book? Becky, that told me that God had known every tear. There was not one I had shed for my son up to that point, nor would they any that I would share afterwards, that he was not acutely aware of, and he was saving them. In some, I don't know if I may not be interpreting that verse completely, but it was so comforting to know that he was so fully and completely aware of our grief. He knew what we were going through, and he reminded me in those days, he willingly gave his son so I could spend eternity with the son I didn't willingly give. I did not willingly give my son. I had willingly given him to the Lord, and it came to God requiring this, and I accepted it. But I wouldn't have given him to anybody for anybody else's sake. Neither would any other parent. So he just would constantly show me his word, and weeping endureth for the night, but joy cometh in the morning. I told Mark, I said, Mark, one of these days, I think we're just going to wake up and suddenly, it's not going to be sudden, but we're going to suddenly realize that things are a little better maybe, because it was just dark. Everything was just dark. And one morning I was standing in my living room, and really I suddenly went, oh, dear Lord, there's just a little bit lighter sense over me, and I was breathing easier. And I thought, dear Lord, I believe it's beginning to dawn again in this house. And it did. And life continued. And we became a happy home again. We truly were. God did not leave us in that horrible place of grief. He did exactly what he says he'll do in his word. And so from that point on, I mean, jump ahead years, and, we raised our daughters, and they both, they married and had children, and we'd done the grandparent thing and absolutely loved it. And one other thing that I'll share about concerning Todd, I'd said that I wanted to do all those boy things, and Todd had started playing t-ball, and the kid loved it. As a matter of fact, he would, in the front yard of our house, he would toss a football over our house, and he would run around to the back, and he could catch that ball before it hit the ground. It was amazing. And he wanted to be a Washington Redskin, just like his Papa Bones.
Oh.
And loved sports, absolutely loved it. And we have 9 grandchildren. 3 are girls, which, give me the frou-frou and all the girl thing I have loved. But he gave us 6 grandsons. And we saw not just t-ball in 1 year of Little League. We saw on up into the years of baseball, and we saw football, and we're still seeing. We just went to a track meet the other day with one of Chrissy's boys, and I believe God gave us those 6 grandsons so that we could live what we didn't get to live. And I know that's just kind of an earthly, worldly kind of maybe way to think, but it was just tender to us. And 1 year, this one that we saw as track meet the other day, he was playing t-ball, and he was a catcher, just like his Uncle Todd was. Mark and I sat and watched that almost 9-year-old play catcher in a baseball, just like we had observed years before with our son.
Wow.
There are no words to describe how precious that was to us. Yeah. That was just kind of our own personal little gift from the Lord that
was a blessing.
He gave us to, yes, for whatever reasons, our son's life was to be short. But he gave us a bunch of grandchildren, and most of them were boys. And so we have loved that life. Shortly after Todd died, just 2 years, my stepfather died quickly, suddenly as well. It just seemed like every death we were associated with until Mark's parents, got older. My dad, Steve, Todd, Mark's brother, Todd, my stepfather, they were all just sudden, with very little warning. But we have found God to be, like I said, exactly who he says he is. He does exactly what he says he will do in his word. He did not leave us comfortless. Jesus did not leave us comfortless. And as years passed and the girls, left home and they had their families, we began to then become the caregivers for Mark's parents and my mother. And we did that for 13 years. And that's a different challenge in life. And, but I had the most precious relationship with my in-laws you can imagine. And I was with each one of them when they breathed their last breath. And so that's pretty much my life. Now I'm loving leading a ladies' Bible study. I've done that for years and years. And Mark, we've retired from farming, but he's working full time down at Helena Chemicals, so he's still working farmer's hours. And our lives are just rich and full at this stage of our lives. And
Let me ask you about something. Whenever I texted you and asked you about doing this, one thing you said, and I want you to kind of elaborate on it, but you said, I pray I can truly express how much God has done for us. You know, based on what your story is, there's so many people that would think, how can she say that? She lost her son. But can you just speak a little bit into that?
You know, Becky, part of it is because we had some trials prior to this. It wasn't, it was just some of those life things that you deal with, like farming is not always every year as successful, to put it mildly. And so we had dealt with some real intense years that looked like Mark might have to change profession and didn't want to. And we began really seeking God and trying to discern what he would have for us. And we began to see his word come alive. And we'd see Bible verses that were like, okay, God, that just looks to me like that's your promise to us. Like the book, verse in Isaiah about making the crooked places straight and the rough places plain. And we're like, okay, Mark's deep desire was to continue farming. And that's another one. That's Mark's testimony. But let's just say after Todd's accident, Mark wanted out of farming. And his brother had already died. And, in that setting, and his dad, and that's another thing I can say about my husband's parents. They lost a son, and then they saw their son lose a son. And their kindness and their strength and their dependency on the Lord was a great influence on our lives. But we, just through different things, we just saw God's word be real and alive, and our view of God, He gave me the son I begged him for. And I told someone one time when they were kind of asking me the same question, I said, because I was asked, are you angry with God? And I was flabbergasted at the question, because I was wanting my life to be one that would,
How soon was this after the accident?
Not long at all. And it was a family member, as a matter of fact. And I thought, have I not shown my life? Have I not shown her how much I love God and how much I trust him? And and it was very disconcerting to me that she asked me that. But my answer to her was, I said, how can I be angry with the God who I begged to give me a son? And he did. I didn't ask for a son that would outlive me. I just simply asked for a son. And he gave me one for almost 9 years. And I guess, I don't know, Becky, God is just, like I said, his word, he just kind of early began to give us a passion for his word. And as I read even now, I'm doing a study that's the chronological study of the Bible. So it's just still eye-opening to get a glimpse of God and his glory and his sovereignty and his goodness, even when our circumstances aren't good. And there was nothing good from a human perspective about losing a child. And my heart just, every time I hear it, I just grieve. Because if there's anything worse in this world, I really, honestly, I've asked God to spare me of it. I'll be real frank.
As a parent, we feel like that's the worst thing.
Yes. As a parent, I mean, there are other
Yes.
things. But I will tell you something else that God showed me. He showed me a young man that chose a lifestyle contrary to God's best, and he died a slow, horrible death. And I stood beside his parents, beside his mother, at the funeral home, and I did not have that layer of grief to live through that she did.
Right.
So you can always, in the most horrific of circumstances, the goodness of God is there if we will just half the time, even give an inch of a time to allow him to let us see it.
Right. Because we have to view that, I'll say this a lot, we have to view everything like that through his perspective.
Yes.
And not through our human
Yes.
eyes that only see the natural.
Yes. And, God only granted those Daniel's the one I think of the most, that opportunity, of course, on the Mount of Transfiguration, that opportunity to see the heavenlies and to see how much more, there is. And we are just limited because and that's faith, that's why we walk by faith and not by sight, or strive to. Believe you me, I fail a lot. And I should know better by the age I am, but God is so gracious to meet us where we are, and he met us where we were, and he showed himself mighty and showed himself faithful.
So at Wynn Baptist years ago, we had several children pass away.
It was uncanny. The pastor, one of the new pastors came in and said, "This is just for the size of our community, for the size of our church." Yeah. It was just unreal, the number of younger children that did pass away.
Mm-hmm. And you were there probably to help walk with some of those parents.
Yes, we tried to. But I will tell you something that I learned, Becky, and this might seem a little odd. I hope I can explain it accurately. We would always reach out, mm-hmm. but and as graciously as they could, they would receive it. But I realized the people that they needed the most were the people they were closest to. Mm-hmm. We could always offer, later on and at some other point, but that initial hours or days after it, that they needed the people who were closest to them. But we did. We would reach out. We always tried to reach out.
Right. And I'm sure at some point that connection is needed and helpful.
And it's one of those. It's like any shared experience in life. When you have the same experience as someone else, mm-hmm. you are just bonded, and especially in the spiritual, in the Christian realm, spiritual realm, we're just bonded because it's just a shared experience, and so we get to share the difficulties, the wonderful scriptures God gave us, and just the comfort, for one another. Mm-hmm. And see, I learned from my dad's death and from Mark's brother's death. My mother, as difficult as it was, and same thing for Mark's parents, life does go on. Mm-hmm. And it's tempered. It's never the same. My goodness, our son died in 1990. So 36 years it will be this fall, 36 years. The chances are very great that on the anniversary of his death, I will cry as if I just got the word. Mm-hmm. It doesn't happen nearly as often as it used to. Yeah. But even something just suddenly out of the clear blue, it seems like, can just suddenly trigger, that grief, and it will swell back up. Mm-hmm. But I strive to do what God told the children of Israel to do. Remember what I did for you. Remember what I did for you. And so I fail so miserably so much, but I do strive to remember his faithfulness towards us.
So I know that you've quoted a lot of scripture, but do you have another favorite verse that you really lean into?
Well, when your other podcast that I listened to, I heard you ask that at the last, and I thought, oh, what if she asked me that? There's so many, but I guess one that I quote a lot is, "It is of the Lord's mercies that we are not consumed, because his compassions fail not. They are new every morning. Great is thy faithfulness." And I will tell you, the way I pray for people when I find out they're in grief, I ask God to allow them to see. He promises that his compassions are new every morning, but sometimes we're so blinded by our circumstances and our pain that we're not aware of them. And so that's one way I always pray for, especially moms that are grieving, that they will be able to see through all of that and see those compassions that are new every morning. That's what he says.
Thank you for joining us today. New episodes release every Wednesday, so be sure to subscribe and get notified when a new episode is available. You can listen on the Journey to Salvation website, Apple Podcast, Spotify, and wherever you get your podcasts. So, where are you on your journey to salvation?